What's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1980 Mazda 626. Up front is a 1.6 liter inline 4 and down below is a 5-speed manual transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Mazda 626 for two reasons. First of all, this is my first time driving this era of 626, so I'm excited to share a little bit of Mazda history with you. The second reason is the fact that this is a modified vehicle. Under the hood is a 1.6 liter out of a Mazda Miata. So this is a little bit of Mazda history, a little bit of modern Frankensteining, and I'm excited to share it with you here today. But if you'd like to submit your own vehicle and have it reviewed here on the channel, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And if you'd like to see all my videos weeks or sometimes months in advance, you can head on over to my Patreon for only $5 a month. But let's get back to that 1.6 liter under the hood. Well, like I said, it is from a Mazda Miata. Originally, this came with a 2-liter inline 4. However, they were kind of notoriously unreliable. The reason for that is back in the late 70s, Mazda wanted a bigger engine. They had a 1.8 liter and they wanted a 2-liter. So what they did is they just made the 1.8 liter bigger. And what this ended up meaning is that the cylinder walls were so thin that they would blow up quite a bit. So the owner blew the motor up and he fitted this 1.6 liter Miata engine in its place. The reason for 1.6 is that A, it's a simpler setup, so it only has one O2 sensor, less sensors overall, but B, they're a lot cheaper than finding the 1.8 liters since those are a little bit more sought after. Like I said, paired to it is a 5-speed manual transmission. This is the standard Miata transmission. So it is not the 626 transmission, although it was originally manual as well. And surprisingly, the Miata transmission bolts right into or slides right into the stock drive shaft, so it didn't really need much modification after that. Last but not least, this generation of Mazda 626 is rear-wheel drive from the factory, which is pretty doggone cool. So how does it feel to drive the Mazda Miata swapped 626? Well, it's not the fastest thing in the world, but it's happy. I'm also going uphill. It's kind of not a fair judgment of it, but it has that Miata buzziness and it does make more power than this would have made factory. This makes about 105 horsepower where the American California market 626 only made 75 horsepower from the factory. Second gear, help me out here. It's not fast. It's not fast in literally any stretch or meaning of the word, but it is fun, it's buzzy, and you're shifting gears in a rear-wheel drive sedan, which just isn't really available anymore. Visibility is great, you have really thin A-pillars. Steering is non-power, however at speed it's not an issue. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me I have 4 gauges. Off to the left is the speedometer, in the center is the coolant temperature and fuel, and off to the right is the tachometer. On the steering wheel, we do get horn buttons on all 3 spokes. Very interesting to see that. And of course, the horn still works. And off to the left, we do have some added buttons. The original button for the rear trunk release is still here, but we have added buttons for the fan, fog lights, and check engine light from the Miata since it's running a 1990 Miata ECU. Down below those buttons, you do have a little secondary tiny little glove box or storage compartment, which is super neat and super practical. On the door, we just have the crank for the window, latch to get in and out, pretty simple stuff here. And moving into the center, we do have some added gauges for that swap just to keep an eye on things. These are not factory in any way. Down below, we have a foreign market clock surrounded by 2 climate vents. We have the very simple climate controls. This was originally optioned with air conditioning. However, it no longer works. Radio, 8-track, and optional cassette player. So all of your media needs back in 1980 were met here in the 626. Then we do have an aftermarket cup holder. The owner actually 3D printed this for the big friggin' bottle, and it of course fits perfectly because he took the measurements of the bottle. However, this is not factory, so it overall fails, but Lake's 3D print actually does pass. Then we do have the shifter. Now this is the standard shift boot and shift knob from the 626. However, this is paired to or welded onto the Mazda Miata transmission. And normally this would be where that cup holder is. Because the Miata transmission is a little bit longer, it is moved back slightly. Then we do have a handbrake and center console and the seats. The seats are covered in lamb's wool covers. However, the back seats are stock, so we'll get to that in a second. They are very comfortable, they're cozy, and in 1980 they did have lumbar support, which was a nice feature to have. And the 2 bucket seats wasn't quite the status quo by 1980, but was definitely becoming the status quo during the era. However, as I mentioned, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the Mazda 626 from 1980, and it's not very spacious, but this is what the original seats looked like. They are vinyl seats, and they get very, very hot in the summer like they are today and right now. They're very cushy though. I mean, you bounce right into them. Very, very comfortable seats, very cushy, and this was the family car. Families bought this to go to church, school, and football practice. I mean, this was the family mobile, not only for us here in America, and this was a lot of people's first taste of Mazda. The 70s was kind of a weird time. Mazda was this niche little company, at least here in the States, and funny enough, where we're filming today is Seattle, Washington, and this is where one of their first dealerships ever was. But in the 80s is where they actually started to gain traction, and people started becoming familiar with Mazda, and it became a household name, and so a lot of that was due to these little sedans, less so the sports car. There were a lot of little companies that had sports cars, but having a family vehicle was something a little bit nicer, and that's very clear here. I'm not loving it, but I'm also not hating it, and I'm back here, and I'm happy to be. Around the back in the trunk, the owner has turned it into a shrine to the Mazda 626 with different magazines that the vehicle's been featured in, manuals, the original airbox, all of that is found in the back, and it is a pretty sizable trunk as well, so I'm happy to see all of that. One thing I do want to note is that this does have an aftermarket third brake light. The third brake light wasn't required until 1986. However, it was kind of popular at the time to actually buy a kit to put one in for safety. So this is actually really cool. This is from the 80s, a third brake light kit that has been added to this Mazda 626. Now we got to talk about the looks, and obviously this car is awesome. It has the factory paint on it, and these are Koning rewind wheels because it is a 4x110 bolt pattern shared with the first generation Mazda RX-7, which is notoriously very difficult to get wheels for, but Koning rewinds are some of the only options that you have. This does have some badges on the grille. It has some added badging on the back, and as you'll see on the back, it does say Mazda Capella. This is actually a Japanese domestic market label. This is what it was called worldwide, except for in Scotland or the UK, it was called the Montrose, but it was the Capella everywhere else, and then it was also sold as 626 everywhere else. So it had a couple of different names as it was sold in different markets, and the owner, Lake, has put the Capella badge on the back. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving the 1980 Mazda 626? Well, first of all, right off the bat, obviously this has been very fun. The Miata swap is successful. It makes the car fun, it's enjoyable, and honestly, it makes the car more livable, and it's easier to find parts. You can go to an AutoZone and buy a head gasket for a 1.6 liter Miata, where you might not be able to do that with the standard 2 liter that came in this car. It's not fast, but I honestly do enjoy everything. Everything in here is very, very honest, and that's one of the big reasons why I love 80s cars, is because they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Everything in here is very analog, it's very straightforward, it's very unapologetic, but in a good way. You have music options, you have seats, you have a shifter, you have a steering wheel. Nothing in here feels excessive, nothing in here feels out of place. The car itself is very planted and very enjoyable while not getting too out of hand. bland. It does have the front suspension from a 1981 Mazda RX-7, and in a similar way, it actually has a solid rear axle, like an RX-7 of the era. And this is an interesting crossover for Mazda, because in the 1970s, Mazda went gung-ho on the rotary engine, and so even the family vehicles, the Capella included, had the Mazda rotary. And as we've learned, the Mazda rotary wasn't a very efficient or very reliable engine. And so by the late 70s, they started to phase it out, and this was kind of Mazda saying, hey, yeah, we screwed up, we're going back to the 4 cylinders. And they kept the rotary as the sporty engine because it was very good about that, but it wasn't families that were buying RX-7s. So they could kind of be a little bit unreliable, where the family car had to be reliable. And this is Mazda going back to that. They were kind of going back to their roots. They waved the white flag and said, you know what, the rotary didn't work as well as we thought. Let's offer something better. And these cars were very, very good. I will say the 2-liter was a little unreliable at the time, but the later 80s cars were more reliable. The 90s Mazdas got even more reliable, and obviously what's shoved under the hood is one of their most reliable engines that they've made. The 1.6-liter is a very, very strong engine for the Miata. It's a beloved engine, maybe not as a modifiable engine, but it's loved. It's great. It's buzzy. I owned a 93 Miata with this engine, and I loved it to death. And so this car is simply lovely. And if you don't need to break a land speed record, this is just a nice Sunday cruiser. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Lake for driving this up here from Southern Oregon to Seattle, Washington, just so I could review it. I appreciate him doing the 2-day trek to make this video happen. He's been a wonderful supporter and a wonderful friend over the years. He has built this vehicle in such an awesome way, and I'm very appreciative of him sharing it with me. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.